Welcome to Iraqi Dinar News, where you receive real and authentic updates about the Iraqi dinar. If you want to stay informed with moment-by-moment developments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. In today's discussion, we're analyzing a statement that has been circulating among Iraqi dinar observers, suggesting that a potential exchange rate change could occur relatively soon after the conclusion of ongoing geopolitical tensions, with some expectations pointing toward a time frame of just a few weeks rather than several months. While this kind of statement can generate excitement, it's essential to approach it with a grounded, analytical perspective and examine what is realistically possible based on Iraq's economic structure, policy environment, and historical precedent. First, let's break down the key elements of the statement. It ties three major developments together: the end of a conflict or geopolitical instability, the formation or stabilization of government structures, and a potential change in the exchange rate of the Iraqi dinar. The suggestion is that once these conditions align, changes could happen relatively quickly. On the surface, this may sound plausible, especially given how closely political stability and economic policy are linked in emerging markets like Iraq. However, the real question is not whether these elements are connected, but rather how quickly such transitions can realistically take place. To understand this better, we need to look at how exchange rate decisions are made in Iraq. The Central Bank of Iraq operates within a framework that prioritizes monetary stability, inflation control, and foreign reserve management. Any adjustment to the exchange rate is not simply a reaction to political events, but rather the result of careful coordination between fiscal authorities, international financial institutions, and domestic economic indicators. This includes factors such as oil revenue stability, foreign currency reserves, inflation trends, and the strength of the banking sector. Historically, even when Iraq has experienced improvements in political stability, exchange rate policy has remained cautious and deliberate. Changes, when they do occur, are typically preceded by clear policy signals, technical preparations, and often consultation with global institutions such as the International Monetary Fund. This is important because it highlights that while political developments can create favorable conditions, they do not automatically trigger immediate currency revaluation. Now, let's consider the idea that a rate change could happen within a few weeks after the end of a conflict. From an economic standpoint, this would require a very high level of preparedness already being in place. For such a timeline to be realistic, Iraq would need to have strong foreign reserves, a stable and functioning government ready to implement policy changes, and a clear strategic objective behind the adjustment. Additionally, there would need to be confidence in the banking system and sufficient infrastructure to handle the implications of a new exchange rate. One of the key challenges here is the formation of government. Political transitions in Iraq have historically taken time, often involving complex negotiations between different parties and factions. Even after agreements are reached, implementing policy changes and aligning economic strategies can take additional time. Therefore, while it's possible that progress could be faster under certain conditions, assuming a rapid turnaround within weeks may underestimate the complexity of the process. From a short-term perspective, statements like this can influence market sentiment and expectations among dinar followers. They may create optimism and renewed interest in the currency, particularly among those who have been waiting for signs of change. However, it's important to distinguish between sentiment and actual policy action. The Central Bank of Iraq has consistently emphasized stability and gradual reform rather than sudden shifts, which suggests that any changes would likely be communicated clearly and implemented in a controlled manner. Another factor to consider is the role of external conditions. Iraq's economy is heavily dependent on oil exports, which means global oil prices play a significant role in determining fiscal strength. Even if geopolitical tensions ease, the broader economic environment must also be supportive. For example, stable or rising oil prices, manageable inflation, and a favorable balance of payments would all contribute to creating the conditions necessary for any exchange rate adjustment. Looking at the longer-term implications, the idea of a rate change tied to political and economic stabilization is not without merit. As Iraq continues to rebuild its economy, improve governance, and strengthen its financial institutions, there is potential for gradual appreciation or adjustment in the currency's value. However, this process is typically measured in years rather than weeks, as it involves structural reforms, diversification of the economy, and sustained investor confidence. It's also worth noting that exchange rate changes are not always upward or beneficial in the way that some investors might expect. In some cases, adjustments are made to correct imbalances, address inflation, or align with market realities. Therefore, any discussion about a rate change should consider both the direction and the purpose of the adjustment rather than assuming a specific outcome. For Iraqi Dinar followers, the key takeaway is to remain informed and cautious. Statements that suggest rapid timelines should be evaluated against official announcements, economic data, and credible sources. It's always better to rely on confirmed policy decisions rather than speculation or informal commentary, especially when it comes to financial matters. In terms of practical implications, if geopolitical tensions were to ease and a stable government were formed, we could expect to see gradual improvements in economic confidence. This might include increased foreign investment, stronger banking activity, and more consistent fiscal policy. Over time, these factors could contribute to a more favorable environment for the Iraqi dinar. However, this would likely be part of a broader, long-term trajectory rather than an immediate shift. Another important aspect is communication from the Central Bank of Iraq. In the past, major policy changes have been accompanied by clear statements and explanations to ensure transparency and maintain market stability. This means that any significant move regarding the exchange rate would likely be announced through official channels rather than emerging suddenly without prior indication. It's also useful to consider the regional and international context. Iraq does not operate in isolation, and its economic decisions are influenced by relationships with neighboring countries, trade partners, and global financial institutions. Stability in the region can certainly support economic growth, but coordination and alignment with international standards remain critical. Ultimately, while the statement we're analyzing presents an optimistic scenario, it should be viewed as a perspective rather than a confirmed outlook. The connection between political stability, government formation, and economic policy is real, but the timeline and execution are subject to many variables. As such, it's important to approach these discussions with a balanced mindset and a focus on verifiable information. For those closely following the Iraqi dinar, staying updated on official announcements, economic indicators, and policy developments will provide a much clearer picture than relying on speculative timelines. Monitoring factors such as oil revenue, inflation rates, foreign reserves, and government stability will offer valuable insights into the direction of Iraq's economy and its currency. As we move forward, it will be important to watch how geopolitical developments unfold and how Iraqi authorities respond. Progress in these areas could indeed set the stage for future economic adjustments, but patience and careful analysis will remain essential. Thank you for watching. If you want to stay updated with responsible, factual, and professional Iraqi dinar analysis, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Please remember, this content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice.